So after trillions of dollars in bank bailouts, stimulus, quantitative easing to infinity, and a recent statement from Ben Bernanke at the Federal Reserve telling us that they're not going to raise rates until 2014, 2009, 2010, 2011, 12, 13, 14, 6 years since the collapse of global capital markets in 2008, the real GDP growth rate only grows at a clip of 2%. 2% is as good as it gets. Housing's at a multi-decade low, has crashed for the 6th consecutive month, although we've seen pockets of the United States move and bounce around the bottom after losing about 90% of its value in just a couple of years. Also, the latest tyranny bill, CISPA, C-I-S-P-A, is proven, just like SOPA and PIPA, which the people were actually able to revoke and to stop, that the government will use anything at its disposal to bend over the American people and to strip you of your constitutional civil liberties and your right against, as protected in the U.S. Constitution, unlawful search and seizure. Now, if it's a matter of national security, according to CISPA, hey, maybe you're a terrorist, maybe you're a hacker, or maybe they just catch a word in there about Obama that they don't like. With the CISPA bill, they can go in and check all your emails and monitor your accounts. But here's what Americans are missing in regards to SOPA and PIPA and CISPA. We're focusing too much on the legislation, too much on the bills themselves, saying, oh my God, I can't imagine if the United States government had that kind of dictatorial power and was able to, pull down my pants and expose me and expose what I'm doing and saying online. See, that right there is the fiction, and that is the lie that the American people are telling themselves. The government does not need these bills, does not need SOPA, PIPA, or CISPA to do these sort of things. They already are. They're already monitoring everything you say or do, everything you write, everything you post, whether or not it's on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, or just the search engines that you might frequent, such as Google or Bing. You're already being monitored. You're already being watched. Of course, the Patriot Act, which is the most unpatriotic acts that could have possibly been passed post-September 11th, 2001, which was planned long in advance before that tragedy or that national crime was committed against humanity, whether or not you feel that that was committed by the government itself or crazy terrorists. You know those crazy people that wear the turbans or whatever, or those things around their head in the Middle East that we need to be really afraid about? So here's my prediction. Take it for what it's worth. Gas, according to the Department of Interior Secretary Ken Salazar, he says we could have $9 a gallon gasoline in the near future. Well, I don't know if we quite get to $9 a gallon, but gas is definitely going higher, and it's going to kneecap any chances of an economic recovery. And our stock market people always love to tell me that, oh, Christopher, it hasn't crashed yet. Oh, it hasn't crashed. Well, it has crashed, my friends. It's crashing higher now with hyperinflation. It's crashing higher now with the inflation that we see not only at the gas pump, but with things like food and basic necessities. This is dollar devaluation at its finest. This is what it feels like. This is what it looks like when a fiat currency, the US dollar, which is being printed into infinity, continues to lose its real value, continues to lose its worth. And it's exactly why more and more Americans have been looking at things like gold, silver to protect themselves, which have been around for centuries and have proven to be hard money, real money, and a proven strategy to preserve your net worth. And in my opinion, as I've said many times before, of course, I'm not a professional investment advisor. Please, consult these individuals or companies on your own. But this is one of the few areas, gold, silver, precious metals, that every American needs to have, in my opinion, as part of a well-diversified investment portfolio to protect against these great risks going forward. Now, that's not to say you put all your eggs in one basket, but if we know, and if we're living through now, inflation and a hyperinflation scenario in the very near future where we're actually looking at $9 a gallon of gasoline, or we're looking at food costs going through the roof where we can't even afford to feed our family, But then we're still seeing deflation in areas such as housing and everything that's tied to credit. Because remember, we've talked about this incessantly over the past few years, any credit instruments, mortgages, homes, educational expenses, credit cards, anything tied to the phony credit expansion, the fake wealth machine, has experienced and is experiencing rapid, aggressive, massive deflation. Okay, we've seen this where most people are awake, or have been awoken to it in things like foreclosure and short sale with their homes. But we're getting inflation in other areas, such as the stock market, such as commodities, such as things like food, oil, and transportation expenses. So the economy is being clipped. Again, we're only chugging along at a 2% rate right now, real GDP, with interest rates at 0% at the Fed funds, and throwing in everything including the kitchen sink. And what this is proving, and we saw this with the latest downgrade of Spain's economy, that is austerity is not going to work and isn't working in places like Europe. And if Greece and Spain and Portugal and Italy and Ireland are a model for the United States and a model for the sovereign debt crisis here in the good old USA, it's telling us something. It's flashing red lights, giving us the warning signs that there is no escaping the collapse at hand. There is no escaping the inflation and the potential hyperinflation that we will all be living through, a holocaust of sorts in the very near future. And the only people, the only entities and institutions that we have to thank for this mess and to thank for this tragedy and this pain and suffering that the average American and the average person around the world along with their family will have to bear the burden of are our institutions like central banks, the Federal Reserve, our politicians just like President Bush and Barack Hussein Obama, and maybe even potentially Mitt Romney to follow, and the bankers that control those pawns. Those are the people to blame. Those are the people to focus on. Those are the institutions that we should no longer support. And people ask me all the time, Christopher, how does the system, how does this government come to a grinding halt? Well, it's really easy, and we're seeing this now. People are no longer drinking the Kool-Aid. They no longer believe in the system. They no longer believe in America because it hasn't worked for them. Take a look at recent history. If you bought a home a few years ago for $500,000 and it's worth $100,000 today, it doesn't really look like the system's working. If you've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on a college education and are now sitting in debt, by the way, the only type of debt that you can't file bankruptcy with or rid yourself of, and now you can't find a job. Or maybe you find a job, but it's only paying $30,000 a year at some retail location, serving the elites that caused the collapse in the first place. How is the system working out for you? And so more and more people are tapping out of the old economy. They're tapping out of the system. They're realizing that we do not need government. In fact, you can call it anarchy, although I think it's a bad term, but really what I think it is an independence from the old economy. We had a guest on our show the other day said that 1/3 of the global economy is actually the black market. And I think that tells us something, and that's a staggering figure. But what it tells us is that we can actually form our own communities. We can form our own business models. We can form our own integral relationships with each other and only support those like-minded businesses, banks, institutions, friends, and family that we want to, that are supporting us, where we're actually getting something in return for our efforts, from our sweat, from our hard work, and from our bootstrapping, that in turn is actually enriching our world, enriching the planet, fixing and aiming to fix some of these problems, and that is shunning the old world, shunning the old economy, shunning fraud, shunning corruption, shunning criminals like John Corzine, shunning companies like MF Global and the institution of Wall Street that has only been trading back and forth paper for years at a profit. Look at, for example, how Mitt Romney has come to power. Not only born into a very wealthy family himself, into a royal bloodline, but he is famous and well known and created all of his wealth from private equity, trading nothingness back and forth for big, enormous profits to pad his pockets. What value did that provide to society? What value was provided back? What kind of goodwill to the people? And that's what people are realizing and understanding. There is no value. There is no real value coming back. All these numbers, all this fabrication, all this phoniness in things like the stock market and Wall Street and housing and the credit expansion is giving us back zero in return. And those that are bearing the brunt are people like you and me, our friends, our family. We're losing our homes, we're losing our jobs, and the world is changing. But that is not to say that there's not hope. That is not to say that there is not an opportunity in this change. As long as we are willing to embrace it, as long as we are willing to elevate our consciousness, and as long as we are willing to work together in a new economy, a sound economy, an economy that actually gives back to the planet and to the people of the world and enriches our livelihoods and our lifestyle for not only ourselves, but future generations. I'm Christopher Green. You've been watching Green Wave TV, alternative media television, and I just delivered the Daily Wave. Hard-hitting and in-your-face, America.